We were talking about religious freedom, or we touched on it. Now, the reason religious freedom is so important, well, freedom is important, of course, but religious freedom particularly so. We can deal with the abuses of that freedom, but we first need to claim the freedom to seek the truth and to practice our religion. And there must be conditions established for that. If the world is to enjoy the contribution to peace that religions can deliver, all freedoms are important, and there is a whole gamut of freedoms. Some of them are freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to own property, freedom to raise your kids in the manner that you consider right for your family. Now, all of the freedoms have something in common, which is freedom, of course. And freedom, if it's to have any content at all, must make reference to the human being's free will. If we live in a deterministic universe, and I don't want to lose our atheist friends here because I know that a lot of them may think, as a consequence of their belief system, that there is no such thing as free will. I want to challenge you, because if we are just a walking bundle of chemicals in interaction, and consciousness is just an epiphenomenon of matter, then what are we doing even talking about these subjects? What are we doing cultivating any intention to do anything, to get up in the morning, let alone be engaged in peace education or peace initiatives? So it would seem to sabotage itself to hold that there is no freedom, and at the same time you belie that philosophical position by your every word and every action, which says to the average person and to common sense that I choose this word, I choose this action, which implies that I was free to choose this word and free to choose this action. So I think we do have to posit freedom, even if it means that people with certain kinds of ideology need to make an adjustment. So the common denominator of all the freedoms, all the liberties, is the spontaneous action of free will. What makes religious freedom fundamental is that it not only affirms the freedom of the will, but it also looks to the source of that freedom. In a creator, in a supreme being. That's usually how it's understood. In fact, the word religio, from which we get religion, means to link back, connect back to the source of everything, the source of this creation, the source of this world, the source of our consciousness. the source of our life. And it is important to ask yourself, if you accept freedom, and if you don't accept freedom, I don't see how you can sidestep the contradiction, because your words and actions will belie your denial that freedom exists. So given freedom, what do you think is the source of freedom? And it is important, I think, to answer that question. If you care about freedom, because it might be suggested that you're only free insofar as you are permitted to be free by society, by its institutions, by the powerful, by a power elite.
The power elite does have a hold on you though, Thomas, to a certain extent. They will limit your freedoms.
Yes, because we have the experience that they can limit our freedoms. I suppose the classic case is just going back a few years to the COVID pandemic. And here in Australia, there was a lot of language around, if you do the right thing and you get the jab and you wear your mask and so on, well, we'll give you your freedoms back. Is that what freedom is? Is it some permission that is granted by those who are in power to those who aren't? Does this take us back to that initial power struggle, that cultural Marxist dynamic that we were talking about in the last segment? All right, let's think it through. Is that what freedom is for you, a permission? What a law court will grant, what a parliament will permit, what a corporation says goes. I suppose you've got to ask yourself, if it's not a permission, what is it? Well, maybe it's a right, maybe it's an inalienable right. And as human beings and citizens of the planet now, global citizens, we are familiar with this kind of language as well. In the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, in the US Bill of Rights, in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, we have rights, we have freedoms. And they are inalienable in the sense, in the sort of classical American formulation, in the sense that you can't be alienated from them. They can't be taken away from you. You can't be made alien to these rights. The implication, of course, being that nobody gives you your rights or takes them away. You may be in circumstances which prevent the expression and the exercise of your rights. Or there may be times where you waive your right to some of your freedoms. But it doesn't mean that its existence is obliterated. You take responsibility for the non-exercise, or you may be in a set of circumstances, as I say, where you can't express that right. But that's not proof that A, the right doesn't exist in the first place, it's virtual or illusory, or B, that it's really a permission granted by society. If we go back to the idea of the inalienable right, where does it come from? What is its source? For some people, it's nature. It's the nature of man, the nature of humanity. For others, for the religious, it's the Creator. The Creator is the source of our rights. So just as there is a set of conditions that must be met in that topsy-turvy reality where people think that rights are permissions granted by the powerful, and therefore it's important to jump all their hoops and fulfill all their conditions, whatever that means, paying your taxes, walking on the right side of the road, wearing a mask, getting immunised. You can think of 1,000 cases. Then if you're meeting a set of conditions there in order to enjoy your freedom, because what you're in effect doing is placating the source, meeting the conditions set by the source of the rights. Over on the other side, if the source is the Creator, then to enjoy your rights, you need to meet the conditions set by that source. What are the conditions set by the Creator? Well, we can go into that, but for convenience and for brevity of reference at this point, we'll just call it the moral law. Just as there are laws over here that society might impose for you to enjoy your freedom of movement, the freedom to go into the supermarket and buy things that you don't really need, or the freedom to visit someone. You have to follow certain rules and conditions. In order to enjoy your rights over here, for the religious minded, you need to meet the conditions set by the Creator. All the thou shalts, the thou shalt nots. As I say, we won't get into the details now, because then you have an interfaith discernment to make. Who sets the laws? Which laws? Which rules? Which Creator? But then we lose the forest for the trees. We want to hold the forest in view. And so we say that your freedoms are there, but on the condition that you follow the moral law. Does that make sense?
It does.
Right. Now, every freedom or right, every freedom has two vectors, shall we say. Freedom from and freedom to. We can think of the freedom as a freedom from coercion, but we also need to think of it as the freedom to follow the moral law, to do what's right. I think we'd probably agree that freedom isn't the freedom to do anything we please, irrespective of our state of mind or motivation. What if we're deranged? What if we claim the freedom to shoot people at will? What if we claim the freedom to interfere with minors? What if we just claim the freedom to walk into any establishment and take whatever we want without making any recompense? So I think any reasonable person would agree that freedom has its bounds, we don't want to be forced, but at the same time, we can't do anything. Freedom from, freedom to, freedom from coercion, freedom to follow the moral law. Now, what happens when we exercise our freedom and it's disruptive? I'm following the Quran or the Bible or the Talmud or the Upanishads, and they're telling me to go and kill this person. It's a disturbance to the public order. It's a threat to life, limb and property. In the situation where the exercise of our religious freedom leads to chaos and mayhem and damage and death and destruction and heartbreak, the civil authority, the state, has the responsibility of stepping in and re-establishing public order. I believe in the document Dignitatis Humanae from the Second Vatican Council, that much of a case was made that yes, we have rights to practice our religion, whatever they may be. And when I say that, I don't just mean to do it privately within oneself, but to take it into the public square. See, I might have my beliefs, but do I have a right to stand on a soapbox in the Domain or in Hyde Park, wherever you may live, and loudly proclaim the tenets of my religious faith? Freedom of speech. Can I, if I'm a Catholic, can I take action? Can I take my rosary beads and pray them outside an abortion clinic? If I'm a believer, a Christian, a Muslim, or some other faith, and I run a school and decide on a particular policy for employment of staff, such that that staff have to be practitioners of the religion that the school is set up to teach in their religious education curriculum. For our rights to have teeth, they need to be actionable in the public square. So I'm not simply talking about the right to hold whatever beliefs you want in private and not to disturb or challenge anybody's thinking by speaking these ideas out in public and by acting on them according to some sense of mission that you might have. Activists do as much. The tree huggers, the greenies, the protesters, Rainbow Warrior, Sea Shepherd, the people that try to stop the whaling boats, the people that try to stop trees being cut down in the Amazon and elsewhere because they have environmental concerns and priorities. They might chain themselves to trees. That's action taking. They're exercising their freedom to take action. And we have to be careful about denying anybody their freedom. There has to be very good and defined reasons for denying freedom. If we deny freedom from just as barbarous and bloody-minded a place, or just as narrow-minded a place, we have the situation of the blind leading the blind. So in order to curb the excesses of religious expression in the public square, whether in more traditional societies, there used to be confessional states where there was an established religion, like the Church of England in England. There still is there. In India, the Hindu religion is predominant. But we're not simply talking about states that have greater or lesser degrees of establishment of religion, where there's an official state religion. We're also talking about multicultural polities, like United States, Australia, and so on, where many faiths and cultures exist alongside each other. And sometimes that can make for friction. But if we intervene, and we're not to be the blind leading the blind, or I should say, if the civil authority is not to be the blind leading the blind, then it must implicitly be inspired by a sense of the moral law. I mean, truly inspired by the true moral law. Let's assume that there is a true moral law. Of course, it would agree with people who have, it would be consonant with people who have a well-informed and active conscience. Human beings, through their conscience, have a sense of what is moral and what is immoral. A lot of people, don't they, Belinda, say, oh, we just want to be good people.
Exactly.
We don't want to follow any particular religion, but we just want to be good people. What does good mean?
But you've got a basic idea of what goodness is.
I think a lot of people would claim to have a basic idea of what goodness is. And it would mean having a grasp on the moral law. And if any civil authority or government has to intervene to sort out conflict that comes about through excesses of religion or warpings of religion that flow out into the public square, then that civil authority, as I say, needs to be informed by the moral law, and therefore implicitly has to be constantly in search of true religious principles. I think this is the corollary of documents like Dignitatis Humanae, which may not go into this directly, but the paradox is, in allowing freedom, as much freedom as possible to religious worship and practice, the state that allows this, that is the shelter for this to happen, has to be authentic and to be on point, has to be in constant pursuit of true religion and the moral law, because morality does not simply just pop out of a vacuum. It usually comes embedded in a wider worldview that addresses ontological, metaphysical, epistemological questions and political questions as well. And let's not kid ourselves that states can be thoroughgoingly secular and have nothing to do with religion, because every member of the bureaucracy or government has their own conscience and formation. They have their own schooling in the faith of their parents or the faith that they've adopted, and they will bring their religious sensibilities to bear in the workplace, in their jobs, in administering the business of state. That's one way it enters in. So I think it is very naive to say, oh, well, we just want secular liberal democracies and we believe that it's possible to be a religion-free zone. And yes, you can have your pockets of religion, but the basic framework, the matrix for this to happen in is a-religious. For one, it'll be based on some philosophy or other. It might be a philosophy that came from the European Enlightenment. It may be the religion of progress. So it may be a philosophy of progress, or it may be a philosophy of environmentalism. It may be a philosophy of capitalism. Whatever the case, these values in these philosophies can't exist forever when they are cut off from deeper sources of belief and deeper philosophical principles, as I say, ontological, metaphysical, epistemological.